Okay, picture this for a second. You've been saving for years. You've skipped the vacations. You've eaten the sad desk lunches. You've watched your friends buy new cars while you drove the same dented Corolla with the check engine light that's basically just a personality trait at this point. And then finally, one random Tuesday night, you open your banking app before bed, half out of habit, half out of hope. And there it is. 6 figures, $100,000, the number you use to whisper to yourself like it was some kind of magic spell. Once I hit 100K, I'll feel like I made it. And then nothing happens. No fireworks, no orchestra swelling in the background. You just kind of sit there, phone glowing in the dark, waiting to feel something, and instead you feel this weird, hollow, almost guilty flatness. Maybe even a little panic creeps in. Like, wait, is this it? Is this supposed to feel bigger? And then your brain, completely uninvited, starts doing the math on rent, or a used car that isn't falling apart, or what a single trip to the ER would cost without insurance. And suddenly, 100 grand feels less like a mountain you climbed and more like a puddle you're standing in. Honestly, I've done this exact thing myself. I remember watching my own savings tick past that number for the first time, refreshing the app like it was going to say something different if I just checked one more time, and just feeling flat, which was disorienting, because I'd spent years quietly believing that number was the finish line, that it meant something, that it would unlock some emotional upgrade in how I saw myself and my life. It didn't. And that confusion sent me down this whole rabbit hole, reading, tracking my own spending obsessively, talking to people way richer and way poorer than me, trying to figure out why a number that used to represent made it now barely registers as a pat on the back. And here's the thing I eventually landed on, the thing I want to walk through with you today. It's not that you're bad with money, and it's not that $100,000 stopped being a lot of money. It's that the entire emotional meaning of money has quietly shifted underneath us, and almost nobody stopped to explain the new rules. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why that number feels smaller than it should. What number, or honestly, what idea, actually produces that feeling of security you've been chasing, and how to stop measuring your life against a moving target that was never designed to make you feel okay in the first place. So let's get into it. The number that used to mean made it. There's this cultural residue we're all carrying around, and it goes something like, $100,000 is real money. It's the you've arrived number. Sitcoms use it as the punchline for winning the lottery light. Parents talk about it like it's the line between struggling and stable. And honestly, for a long time, that wasn't wrong. Adjusted for inflation, $100,000 decades ago could put a solid down payment on a house, cover years of living expenses, or straight up retire someone who lived modestly in a small town. But here's the quiet trick our brains play on us. We keep the symbol long after the substance has changed. The number 100K became shorthand for security, and shorthand is sticky. It doesn't update itself. Your brain doesn't send you a memo saying, "Hey, quick heads up, this number doesn't buy what it used to." It just keeps whispering the old story. And you keep waiting to feel what people used to feel when they hit it. Think about it like a coupon that expired years ago, except nobody told you, and you're still standing at the register confused why the cashier won't honor it. The number's the same. The value behind it isn't. I talked to a friend of mine, mid-30s, does fine for herself, works in marketing, and she told me she hit her 100K savings goal, and instead of celebrating, she just felt this strange dread, like she'd been running toward a mirage. That's such a common experience, it's almost a rite of passage now. You get there, and the ground you thought you'd be standing on turns out to be somewhere else entirely. So why does this matter to you? Because if you're chasing a number that was calibrated for a completely different economic reality, you're setting yourself up to feel like a failure, even when you're actually doing something impressive. And that's a cruel trick to play on yourself. The takeaway here isn't give up on saving, obviously. It's that you need to stop measuring your progress against a cultural leftover and start measuring it against your actual life, which, funny enough, is exactly what we're building toward in this video. Lifestyle creep. The treadmill that moves faster than you do. All right, here's the next piece. And this one stings a little because it's so sneaky. You know that feeling where your income goes up, and for about a week you feel amazing. And then somehow, a few months later, you're just as stressed about money as you were before the raise? That's not a coincidence. That's lifestyle creep. and it is one of the most quietly destructive forces in modern financial life. Here's how it works, basically. You get a raise, or a promotion, or a bonus lands, and your brain, completely reasonably, goes, "Oh, nice, I have room now." So the apartment gets a little nicer, the car gets upgraded. You start doing DoorDash instead of cooking because, hey, you can afford it now. None of these decisions feel reckless in the moment. Each one, on its own, is totally justifiable. It's death by 1,000 reasonable choices. And the maddening part is, your income went up, but your feeling of security didn't move an inch because your spending just quietly matched it, step for step, like a shadow. You're not richer in any way that matters emotionally. You're just running on a slightly faster treadmill, at a slightly higher elevation, sweating exactly as much as before. I'll admit, I fell into this one myself. And it wasn't even dramatic stuff. It was little things. A slightly better apartment, eating out more because I've earned it, subscriptions I forgot I was paying for. Nothing crazy. But when I added it up one weekend, genuinely just sat there with a spreadsheet and some questionable amount of coffee, I realized I was spending almost exactly what I used to consider comfortable, except now at a much higher income. The number changed. The feeling didn't. That was almost funnier than it was upsetting. Why does this matter so much? Because if your spending rises in lockstep with your income, you can double your salary and still feel broke. $100,000 in savings doesn't feel like security if your monthly expenses have also quietly doubled to match your new paycheck. You're not actually further ahead. You've just recalibrated what normal looks like, and normal always finds a way to eat the extra. So here's the actionable piece, and I promise this isn't some rigid cut-out lattes nonsense. Every time your income goes up, before you let your lifestyle expand to fill it, redirect at least half of that increase somewhere. It can't quietly disappear. Savings, investments, debt payoff, whatever your version of future you needs. Let the other half go toward enjoying your life. Because honestly, you should enjoy your life. But that first move, catching the raise before your habits catch it for you, is the difference between money that builds security and money that just evaporates into a slightly nicer version of the same stress. The comparison machine. Now let's talk about the thing that makes all of this 10 times worse. And it's sitting in your pocket right now. Social media has completely rewired what doing well looks like. And it has done it in the sneakiest way possible. Not by lying to you outright, but by showing you a constant, curated highlight reel and letting your brain quietly assume it's the norm. You scroll for 15 minutes and you see somebody's new kitchen renovation, somebody's third international trip this year, somebody's soft launch of a new car they definitely didn't casually afford. And your brain, which is honestly not built for this environment, doesn't process it as, here is one flattering slice of one person's life. It processes it as data, as, I guess this is what normal successful people have? So your internal bar for what counts as doing fine keeps creeping upward, even though your actual bank account never got the memo. Here's a way to think about it. Imagine if you only ever saw professional athletes and assumed that was the average human body. You'd feel awful about your own body for no rational reason, because you're comparing yourself to a curated, filtered, cherry-picked sample. That's exactly what's happening with money online, except it's happening every single day, in tiny doses, until it becomes the water you're swimming in without even noticing it's there. And look, I'm not immune to this either. I've caught myself doom-scrolling and feeling this weird, unearned inadequacy about my own choices. Like, why don't I have that? Why haven't I done that yet? And then had to consciously stop and go, wait, I don't actually know this person's debt, their family situation, their stress levels, any of it. I'm comparing my full, complicated, behind-the-scenes life to somebody's trailer. This matters because comparison is genuinely one of the fastest ways to make objectively good financial progress feel like failure. $100,000 saved is a real meaningful accomplishment, but stack it against a feed full of curated wins, and it can start to feel small, even embarrassing, which is completely backwards. So here's a small, almost silly-sounding piece of advice that actually works. Audit your feed the way you'd audit a budget. If certain accounts consistently make you feel behind, worse, or anxious, mute them, unfollow them, whatever you need to do. This isn't about burying your head in the sand. It's about refusing to let a highlight reel set the emotional benchmark for your very real, very unfiltered life. The ground actually shifted. Okay, but let's be fair here. Because it's not all psychology. Some of this is just cold, hard math, and I think it deserves real airtime. Because it validates something a lot of people feel, but don't always have the words for. It's not just you. The ground genuinely moved. Housing costs in a huge number of places have grown way faster than wages over the last couple of decades. Healthcare costs, similarly, have climbed in a way that makes older comparisons almost meaningless. Childcare, for people who have kids, can rival a second mortgage. Even the basics, groceries, insurance, utilities, have crept up in ways that make older financial benchmarks feel almost like they're describing a different country. So when your parents, or a financial article from a while back, talks about $100,000 like it's this untouchable safety net, they might genuinely be describing a different economic universe. Not because they're wrong, and not because they're out of touch on purpose. It's just that the numbers they're picturing don't map cleanly onto the world you're actually operating in. Here's a way to picture it. Imagine measuring a room with a tape measure, except the tape measure itself keeps quietly stretching every year. You could be doing everything right, measuring carefully, being precise, and still get a wildly different result than someone who used that same tape measure a decade ago. That's what's happening with money. The tool we use to measure enough has been stretching the whole time, and most of us are still reading it like it's fixed. Why does this matter? Because it should take a genuine weight off your shoulders. If $100,000 doesn't feel like the safety net it used to, that's not a personal failing. That's an accurate read of a changed environment. You're not bad at this. You're playing a version of the game with different rules than the one your reference points were built for. The takeaway here is less about a specific action and more about a mental permission slip. Stop beating yourself up for not feeling the way outdated benchmarks told you that you'd feel. Instead, get curious about your own real numbers, your actual cost of living, your actual expenses, your actual risks, and build your sense of enough from there, not from a decades-old script. Status money versus freedom. Money, here's a distinction that, once I really internalized it, kind of rearranged how I think about money entirely. There are two very different jobs money can do for you, and we constantly confuse them. There's status money, the stuff that signals to other people, or honestly sometimes just to yourself, that you're doing well. The nicer car, the bigger apartment, the vacations that look good online. And there's freedom money, the stuff that actually buys you options, time, breathing room, the ability to leave a job that's making you miserable, the ability to handle an emergency without spiraling. The trap is that status money often feels more satisfying in the short term because it's visible, it's immediate, it gets you a little dopamine hit and maybe a compliment or two. Freedom money is quieter. Nobody claps when your emergency fund covers 6 months of expenses instead of 2. Nobody comments, "Wow, love this for you," under a screenshot of your retirement account slowly compounding in the background. It's undramatic, it's boring. And humans generally are not wired to prioritize boring things, even when boring things are exactly what protects us. I think about this like planting a tree versus buying a bouquet. The bouquet is gorgeous right now. It makes the room look amazing today. But it's wilting from the moment you bring it home. The tree looks like basically nothing for a long time. It's just standing there, doing seemingly nothing dramatic. But give it years, and it's providing shade, stability, something that actually holds up a whole ecosystem around it. Status money is the bouquet. Freedom money is the tree. Why does this matter so much? Because if most of your $100,000, or your income, more broadly, is quietly flowing into status purchases, you can look financially successful from the outside while still feeling completely insecure on the inside. The visible stuff and the felt stuff are not the same thing, and confusing them is exactly why so many people who look like they're doing great are secretly anxious every time an unexpected bill shows up. So here's something worth actually sitting with, maybe even doing this week. Go through your last month of spending and just label each expense, honestly, as either status or freedom or joy, because not everything needs to be some grim freedom-only purchase. Joy matters too. You're not trying to eliminate status spending entirely. That's unrealistic and honestly a little joyless. You're just trying to see the ratio, because awareness of the ratio is what lets you shift it on purpose, instead of drifting into it by accident. The real metric: enough, runway, and time. So if $100,000 isn't the magic number, what actually does produce that feeling of, okay, I'm all right. Here's what I've come to believe. After way too much time thinking about this, it's not a number at all. It's a ratio. Specifically, it's the relationship between what you have and what you actually need. Not what you're told you need, not what your feed suggests you need, but your real, honest cost of living. There's a concept some people call runway. Basically, how many months could you survive, comfortably, if your income stopped tomorrow? That number matters infinitely more than your total net worth in a vacuum, because it's directly tied to something real, your ability to breathe. Someone with $50,000 saved and low fixed expenses might have more actual security, more actual freedom, than someone with $300,000 saved but sky-high monthly obligations eating them alive. Think of it like a life raft. It doesn't matter how big the raft is in some abstract sense. What matters is whether it's big enough for the number of people actually on it and the conditions of the water you're floating in. A massive raft in calm water is overkill. A small raft in a storm is terrifying. Size alone tells you almost nothing without context. This reframe changes everything about how you should feel about your progress. Instead of asking, do I have $100,000? How many months of real freedom does what I have actually buy me? That's a number you can build, deliberately, brick by brick, in a way that a vague cultural benchmark never let you do. I remember running this math on myself for the first time, actually sitting down and calculating my real monthly costs. Not the fantasy budget I told myself I lived on, the real one. And it was honestly a little humbling, but it was also the first time a savings number ever made me feel calm instead of anxious, because suddenly it wasn't an abstract milestone. It was months of breathing room I could count on my fingers. So here's the actionable. Move. Figure out your real, honest monthly cost of living, not what you wish it was. Divide your current savings by that number. That's your runway, in months. That number, not the round symbolic 100K, is the one that should actually make your shoulders drop when it goes up. Building your own number. This brings us to the last big piece, which is less a concept and more a practice. And honestly, it's the part that ties everything else together. You need to stop borrowing other people's definition of enough and build your own, on purpose, in writing, so it stops living as a vague, anxious feeling in the back of your mind and starts existing as something concrete you can actually check yourself against. Here's roughly how I think about doing this. Start with your real numbers. Actual monthly expenses, actual debts, actual obligations, no fantasy budgeting. Then figure out what runway feels genuinely secure to you, not to some internet stranger, not to a finance influencer with a completely different life. You. Some people feel safe with 3 months. Some people, because of their job stability or health situation or just their temperament, need 9 or 12 to actually sleep at night. There's no universal right answer here, and anyone who tells you there is one is selling something. Then, and this part matters, separate your money into buckets with actual jobs. Some for that runway, untouched, boring, doing its quiet tree-growing thing in the background. Some for the future, growing slowly, compounding, not meant to be looked at every day. And some, genuinely, for joy, because a financial plan that has zero room for joy isn't sustainable. It's just a different flavor of misery, and you'll abandon it within a year. I think one of the kindest things you can do for yourself is write this down somewhere. Literally write, my number is enough months of expenses covered. Because when it's written down, specific, and yours, it stops being this shapeless anxiety that no amount of money ever seems to satisfy. A moving target with no fixed shape will always outrun you, no matter how fast you save. But a specific personal written-down target, that's something you can actually hit. And more importantly, something you can actually feel hitting, instead of crossing a finish line and wondering why there's no confetti. Bringing it all together. So let's zoom back out for a second, because we've covered a lot of ground here. $100,000 doesn't feel like it used to. And that's not because you're failing at adulthood. It's because the number was always a cultural symbol more than a personal reality. And reality has quietly shifted underneath it. Lifestyle creep eats your raises before you even notice they arrived. Social media hands you a highlight reel and tricks your brain into treating it like a baseline. Costs, especially the big ones, housing, healthcare, childcare, have genuinely outpaced wages in a lot of places. So some of that hollow feeling is just an accurate read of a harder environment, not a personal shortcoming. Status spending and freedom spending get tangled together until you can't tell which one you're actually doing. And underneath all of it, the real thing that produces security was never a round number anyway. It's the ratio between what you have and what your actual life costs. I think about that night, refreshing my banking app, waiting for a feeling that never came. And honestly, I feel kind of tender toward that version of myself now, not because I was wrong to hope for something. Hoping for security is one of the most human things there is, but because I was aiming at a target somebody else drew on the wall for me, without ever checking whether it fit my actual life. And that's really what I want to leave you with. You don't need a bigger number handed down from some cultural script you never agreed to. You need your number. The one built from your real expenses, your real risks, your real definition of a good life. That number might be smaller than you think. It might be bigger, but it will actually mean something when you hit it, because you're the one who defined it in the first place. So maybe tonight, instead of just checking your balance and waiting to feel something, take 20 minutes. Write down your real monthly costs. Figure out your actual runway. Ask yourself honestly, what enough would even look like for the life you're actually living, not the one you're scrolling past. That's not a hype move, and it's not going to feel dramatic in the moment, but it's the quiet kind of progress that actually holds up. The tree, not the bouquet. You've probably already done more right than you're giving yourself credit for. Now go find out what your real number is, and when you hit it, I hope it finally feels like something.